You think your fasting isn't working. The scale hasn't moved the way you expected. You don't look different in the mirror. And somewhere in the back of your mind, you've started wondering, maybe this just isn't for me. I need you to stop right there, because there's a very good chance your body is already burning fat right now, and you've been misreading every single signal it's been sending you. Your body doesn't announce fat loss with a number on a scale. Not at first. It announces it in other ways. Quieter ways. Ways that most people either ignore or mistake for something going wrong. That's what this episode is about. I'm going to show you 7 specific signs that your fasting is actually working. Each one tied to a real physiological shift happening inside you. Not feelings, not motivation. Actual metabolic changes your body goes through when it starts. Using fat as fuel. And here's what I need you to understand before we get into it. These signs show up weeks before the scale moves, weeks before the mirror shows anything. Most people quit right when these signs appear. Not because the process failed, because nobody told them what the process actually looks like from the inside. You're about to know exactly what to look for. Here's the problem most people run into with fasting. They set up the protocol. They push through the hunger. They stay consistent for 2, 3, sometimes 4 weeks. And then they step on the scale, and the number doesn't match the effort. Or they look in a mirror, and nothing looks different yet. So they conclude it's not working. And that conclusion feels completely logical, because we've been trained to measure progress the wrong way. We were taught that the scale is the report card, that the mirror is the scoreboard, that if those two things don't change, nothing is changing. But that's not how metabolism works. Fat loss is not an event. It's a process, and that process has stages. The first stage doesn't happen on the outside. It happens in your cells, in your hormones, in the way your body decides what fuel to burn. And that stage has its own set of signals. Signals that are completely real, completely measurable, but not in pounds, and not in inches. The people who understand this keep going. They know what they're looking for. So when they see it, they recognize it as progress, not as a problem. The people who don't understand this quit at exactly the wrong moment. So let's fix that right now. Here are the 7 signs your fasting is working, starting with the ones that hit your metabolism first. Sign number 1. Your hunger starts to quiet down on its own. Not because you're getting used to suffering, because your insulin levels are dropping, and insulin is the hormone that drives hunger signals in the first place. When you eat frequently, insulin spikes repeatedly throughout the day, and every time it spikes, it eventually crashes, and that crash is what makes you feel like you need to eat again. It's not real hunger. It's a hormonal loop. When fasting starts working, that loop breaks. Insulin stabilizes at a lower baseline, and the hunger that used to feel urgent and aggressive starts to feel manageable. Sometimes it disappears completely for stretches of time. If you've noticed that your fasting window is getting easier, not because you're forcing it, but because you genuinely don't feel the need to eat, that's not willpower. That's your insulin doing exactly what it's supposed to do. Sign number 2. You're thirstier than usual. Most people think something is wrong. They're not sick. They're not dehydrated from exercise, but they're reaching for water more than they ever did before. Here's what's happening. Your body stores carbohydrates as glycogen, and glycogen holds water. Every gram of glycogen stored in your muscles and liver holds roughly 3 grams of water with it. When fasting starts working and your body begins depleting those glycogen stores, it releases that stored water, which means your kidneys are suddenly processing more fluid than usual, and your body is sending you signals to replace it. The thirst is the process. It means your body is shifting away from carbohydrate dependence. It means the switch is beginning. Drink the water. Add a pinch of salt if the thirst feels intense. But don't mistake this signal for a problem. It's the opposite. Sign number 3. Your breath smells slightly different. This one surprises people. And I'll be honest, it's not glamorous, but it's one of the clearest metabolic signals your body can give you. When your body runs low on glucose and starts breaking down fat for fuel, it produces ketones. And one of those ketones, acetone, gets released through your breath. It can smell faintly sweet or slightly metallic. Some people describe it as fruity. Others just know something is different. That's not a dental problem. That's fat being burned as fuel. Your liver is producing ketone bodies. Your cells are learning to use them. And your breath is the exhaust from that process. If you've noticed this and didn't know what it meant, now you do. Your metabolism just changed lanes. Sign number 4. Your energy stops crashing. Think about what your energy used to feel like on a normal eating day. You'd eat, feel fine for a while, then hit a wall somewhere in the mid-morning or mid-afternoon. That foggy, heavy, can't focus feeling that made you want coffee or something sweet. That crash has a name. It's a blood sugar spike followed by a drop. And it happens every single time you eat a carbohydrate-heavy meal. Your glucose goes up, your insulin rushes in to manage it. Your glucose drops faster than it should, and you feel it immediately. When fasting starts working, that cycle breaks. Your body is no longer swinging between glucose highs and lows. It's running on a steadier fuel source, free fatty acids and ketones, and those don't spike and crash the way glucose does. They burn slower. They burn cleaner. So instead of energy that arrives in waves and disappears without warning, you start noticing something different, a kind of flat, consistent energy that just stays. Not a buzz, not a peak, just a steady baseline that holds across the whole day. Most people don't even recognize this as a sign of progress. They expected fasting to feel like deprivation. Instead, it feels calmer than eating used to. That calm is metabolic stability, and it means your body found a different gear. Sign number 5, your thinking gets sharper. This one tends to hit people around week 2 or 3, and when it does, it's unmistakable. Tasks that used to feel heavy start feeling lighter. You sit down to work, and the resistance isn't there the way it used to be. Your thoughts connect faster. You're less distracted by the background noise in your own head. Here's why. Your brain runs on glucose by default. But when glucose isn't available, it adapts. And ketones, the fuel your liver produces from fat, are not a backup system. They're actually a more efficient energy source for brain cells than glucose is. Some researchers describe ketones as a cleaner burning fuel, less metabolic waste, more ADP produced per unit of oxygen consumed. Your brain on ketones is not a depleted brain trying to cope. It's a well-fueled brain running on something it was always capable of using, but rarely got the chance to. Have you ever felt this shift? That window where fasting made you think clearer than you do after a full meal? Drop in the comments. I want to know how many of you have hit this and didn't know what was causing it. Sign number 6, your sleep gets deeper. This one catches people off guard because they don't expect fasting to affect sleep. But the connection is direct, and once you understand it, it makes complete sense. When you eat close to bedtime, especially carbohydrates, your insulin spikes. While your body is trying to wind down, your digestive system stays active. Your core temperature stays elevated longer than it should. And your brain, instead of shifting into recovery mode, stays partially alert managing that. Metabolic activity. The result is sleep that's technically happening, but not fully restoring you. You wake up tired. You don't feel like you actually rested. And you assume that's just how your body works. It's not. When fasting starts working and your eating window is properly timed, you're going to bed with low insulin, stable blood sugar, and a digestive system that's already at rest. Your body can drop into deeper sleep stages faster. Growth hormone, which is released primarily during deep sleep and is suppressed by insulin, gets a longer window to do its job. That job includes fat metabolism, tissue repair, muscle preservation. If you've been waking up recently feeling more rested than usual, not because you slept more hours, but because the sleep itself felt different, that's not a coincidence. That's your hormonal environment shifting in the right direction. Sign number 7. The puffiness starts to go away. Not the fat. Not yet. The puffiness. The kind that lives around your face, your midsection, your fingers. The the kind that makes you look softer than you actually are. That puffiness has two sources. The first is water retention tied to glycogen. The same mechanism we talked about in sign 2. As glycogen depletes, the water bound to it releases and exits through urine. The physical softness starts to firm. The second source is low-grade inflammation, and this one is bigger than most. People realize frequent eating, especially processed foods, refined carbohydrates, seed oils, keeps your gut in a constant state of low-level stress. Your immune system stays slightly activated. Inflammatory markers stay elevated, and the body holds fluid as part of that response. When fasting gives your digestive system genuine rest, 12, 16, sometimes 18 hours without processing incoming food, that inflammatory load drops. The fluid recedes. The puffiness fades. People around you might notice before you do. You look different. Did you lose? Wait, you haven't. Not on the scale. But your body is already showing the work from the inside out. That's sign 7. And it's one of the first visible changes that fasting produces, even when the scale refuses to cooperate. Here's the part nobody talks about. Every single sign I just described, the hunger quieting down, the thirst, the breath, the stable energy, the mental clarity, the deeper sleep, the puffiness, fading, all of it happens before the scale moves. Not slightly before, weeks before. Your body goes through a complete metabolic reorganization before it starts, showing results in the places you're trained to look. The insulin stabilizes. The glycogen depletes. The fat oxidation begins. The inflammation drops. All of that is happening under the surface in a phase most people never get to see the end of, because they quit right here. Not because they're lazy, not because fasting doesn't work for them, because they looked at the scale, saw a number that hadn't moved enough, felt the thirst and the breath change, and assumed something was wrong, and made a completely logical decision based on completely wrong information. Think about what that actually means. They were in the middle of the process. Their body had already done the hard part, breaking the insulin cycle, learning to access fat as fuel, rewiring, the metabolic default, and they stopped. 3 days, maybe a week before the changes would have started showing up on the outside. This is the most expensive mistake in fasting. Not breaking the fast wrong. Not eating the wrong foods in your window. Quitting during the transition phase because you didn't recognize the transition as progress. The signs I showed you today are not side effects. They're not discomforts to push through. They're the process. They're your body doing exactly what you asked it to do in the order it was always going to do it. The thirst means the glycogen is clearing. The breath means the ketones are rising. The energy stability means the insulin is settling. The clarity means the brain found cleaner fuel. The sleep means the hormones are rebalancing. The puffiness fading means the inflammation is dropping. The hunger quieting means the loop finally broke. That's not 7 random symptoms. That's one coherent metabolic shift, told 7 different ways. And now you know how to read it. Let's bring this together. Your fasting is working when your hunger quiets without force. When you're thirstier than usual. When your breath shifts. When your energy stops crashing. And your thinking gets sharper. When your sleep feels different. When the puffiness starts to clear before the scale gives you anything. Those aren't accidents. Those aren't side effects to manage. That's your metabolism changing lanes. Now I want to ask you something directly. Which one of these signs have you already experienced and dismissed as a problem? Tell me in the comments, because I think more of you have been closer than you realized. Don't quit when your body is finally talking to you. There's one more layer to this, and it's the one that determines whether these 7 signs lead somewhere or whether they fade and you end up back at square one. It's not about what you eat. It's not about how long you fast. It's about a specific set of mistakes people make during exactly this phase. Right when the metabolism is shifting, that shuts the process down before it ever reaches the outside. Most people make at least 2 of them without knowing. Next time, I'm going to show you exactly what those mistakes look like and how to make sure you're not the one making them at the worst possible moment. And if you want to understand what your body is actually going through during the fast itself, hour by hour. I covered that in the last video. Most people quit before the best part. Now you'll know exactly why they shouldn't.